Okay, you guys, let's get caught up on the lawsuit against WSU.
Kohberger allegedly stalked one of the victims. That's false. You knew that was false. For anybody who had never heard that before, that question is now planted into them, unqualified representation that Mr. Kohberger stalked one of the witnesses, and that's false. We do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122. But we can put his phone in that area. There are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants.
Everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged. Hey guys, this is Jules with True Crime Reactions. There has been more documents filed when it comes to the civil suit, the tort case for damages that was filed against WSU by Steve Goncalves, Karen Laramie, Jeffrey Kernodle, and Stacy Chapin for all of the victims of the Idaho student murder case. Now, Sarah D. Irish over on Twitter has posted that there are updates when it comes to the argument to move the courtroom over to a federal court. We do see now that the plaintiffs, being the family of the Idaho 4 victims, have now come forward with their response after there was a response from WSU, and that response is what we're going to go over in this video so that we can get caught up to date in the very next one, because we've got to do this in order, and there's been other things going on. So let's just go ahead and get to this, but please keep in mind that this is not the most latest information. We have this response from the plaintiffs themselves, plus a declaration that they also filed of a Thomas B. Vertetti's in support of them not wanting this moved over to federal court. Now, I will tell you, I skimmed over this a little bit, and basically what it's telling me is that if this goes into a federal court, there's something that's going to make everything that they're filing for obsolete and irrelevant, and it'll completely take away their case. That's how I am understanding it. But again, we've got to start here before we can get to there. Let's go ahead and go over what we did get from WSU. Now, again, there's a lot of repetition in this, as you can see. WSU is without knowledge or information sufficient to admit or deny the allegations in paragraph 5 and therefore denies the same, and so on and so forth for literally every single paragraph until it gets to a different verbiage. There's a couple of lines that are change in here depending on if it's about a law or if it's about some sort of allegation. Like right here, it says the allegation contained in paragraph 34 contain allegations or contentions of law which require no answer. To the extent an answer is required, WSU denies the same. And again, these are just repeated statements. So I went in and I bracketed in blue with my finger on my laptop screen. That's why it's all squiggly. What was repetitive, and the highlighted portions are things we're going to actually read. This is a 51-page document. So getting everything separated ahead of time will make this a lot faster. Now, one of the first things I noticed is that they misspelled Bryan Kohberger's name. Doesn't matter. In a freaking court document, it sure does. If we are going to complain that they called Kayla as they were reading off the charges to him over 3 years ago, then we have to complain about how over 3 years later, 3.5 now, almost years later, they're still having mistakes. It doesn't matter to me that this isn't a different state, different attorneys. I don't care. You're supposed to be high-end, highly paid people that should be paying attention. And this is not the only place that it's misspelled. It's misspelled every time they use his first name. I don't know why it's like that. I don't know why they didn't fix it. I don't know if they've submitted something that is showing to be amended, but I don't know. That's just what it is. So as we're going to go through these, I'm just going to show you the base of what's happening over here on this side for all of the repeated statements so that you can get an idea of what they're actually saying this for, because for the majority, it's for the allegations against him when it comes to the crime itself, which we already know. They've filed nothing but lies in this thing when it comes to actual case fact here, and also when it comes to things being filed with WSU at the school, like all the rumors we've been told. WSU is saying they don't have sufficient evidence or knowledge of that information. But if those things were filed within your own school, that's a crazy statement to make, right? So that's why we're going to go over this as much as we possibly can with as vague as it is, because I honestly want this to continue. I want to get to where we have depositions. I want to get to where there's evidence and discovery. Call me selfish. I don't care. I think the lawsuit's bullshit. Again, it's based on a bunch of lies, but I want to get to more truth. And since the state of Idaho completely failed, maybe Washington will get us there. I don't know, but let's go ahead and get started reading this. Introduction. WSU admits Bryan Kohberger murdered 4 University of Idaho students. Except for that, WSU denies each and every remaining allegation in paragraph 1. And you're going to see that they are saying that they admit that he is the one who did it, because their fight is not his guilt or his innocence. They're going based on the fact that he pled guilty. They're going based on the fact that he is now serving life sentences. They're going based on the actual facts of what is the finalized situation here, which again really sucks because there's nothing but lies in the lawsuit about the stalking, about the prints being on the back window being Kohberger's, all the things. So hopefully it goes to this jury that they're asking for, because I'd like for all of these freaking lies and false statements in here to be picked apart. They deserve to be picked apart. Okay, number 2. WSU admits it admitted Kohberger into the PhD program in WSU's Criminal Justice and Criminology Department. WSU also admits it offered Kohberger financial support that included a salary for Kohberger's teaching assistant position, health insurance, and resident tuition waiver. WSU further admits that Kohberger was provided with on-campus housing. WSU denies each and every remaining allegation in paragraph 2. Number 3, WSU is without knowledge or information sufficient to admit or deny the allegations in paragraph 3. And if you see this, it's about him having discriminatory, harassing, or stalking behavior when it comes to young female students at WSU. I find it really super interesting that that is their response to these kinds of things. Now, when it comes to paragraph 4, it says, again, they admit that on November 13th, 2022, Kohberger murdered the 4 University of Idaho students. Except for that, WSU denies each and every remaining allegation in paragraph 4. And it basically says that WSU basically predicted the fact that Kohberger was going to end up killing these 4 people. That's the statement in the actual plaintiff's filing. Now, the rest of this goes on to talk about how he pled guilty, how there's a history of substance issues, that there was a theft arrest, again, for his sister's phone, where his family definitely did call the cops on him whenever they thought that he was doing something wrong. It goes on to his history some more before he ended up moving over to Pullman. And in all of this information about the female graduate students complaining about him and all the things, they repeat the same statement that they are without knowledge or information sufficient to admit or deny. And again, these were things that were filed with the school itself. So it's just interesting that they're stating that. Now, when it comes to number 17, it starts talking about how there was other issues with the WSU and the Pullman Police Department when it comes to inappropriate sexual behavior. I honestly didn't know until reading the plaintiff's filings that there were so many things happening in way of what we're being told was the situation here with Kohberger and the female students, whatever, over at the school. And it wasn't until, I don't know, 10 days or so before the murders took place that the police officer that was the one who was actually the real person doing all the bad stuff here actually resigned. Everyone else that was above him when it came to rank, even though this guy was willing to give the girl's name and make a full statement and admit to everything, they were like, no, we can't do that. We got to keep quiet. You're not going to say a damn thing. All those people that were above him to cover this up for no reason are the ones who lost their positions first. The person responsible for the base of everything went on for a few more years without actually leaving his position. And again, I believe it was like November 3rd, November 2nd, 3rd, 4th, somewhere like that. It's in the plaintiff's filing. I didn't know about any of that. And the reason why it matters to me is because I'm seeing a community already dealing with this situation. If you're going to have somebody coming in and there's multiple people coming in and filing complaints against this exact same person, and you're already in the middle of like trying not to drown in the situation you're currently in that's mirroring this other one, I feel like you would pay more attention, would you not? I really want you to think about it for a minute. Would you be more likely to brush off the situation because you're already dealing with a situation? Or would the similarities be enough for you to be like, oh, hell no, we're not letting this one get away from us because look what we're dealing with right now. I don't want to deal with this years down the line. We're handling it now. No, they're wanting us to believe that they just didn't care. But now we have WSU saying, hey, we're without knowledge or information sufficient enough to even talk about this right now. I don't know what you mean. When they're the ones who apparently had all of these things filed with them. I don't know. It's very odd. Let's continue. Now it goes on to some more of the story about how in 2007, all this stuff started with people being accused and found guilty of sending around inappropriate emails on university computers. Then it goes on to stuff about 2011, 2022, all kinds of different things that were going on. But then it just goes on to repeat the same things over and over again until it gets to 22. And then it talks about how it was against the above described backdrop, meaning the crazy situation with the stuff with the police, that Kohberger ended up coming into the situation. And he instantly started being overtly harassing and stalking and was being predatory and all these things. And again, for 22, they're claiming WSU admits on November 13th, 2022, Kohberger murdered the 4 University of Idaho students, but except for that, WSU denies each and every remaining allegation in paragraph 22, meaning everything they're claiming that is going on with Kohberger, WSU is going to continue to be like, yeah, no, nope, not going to work for us. Now, the next two, again, are the exact same statements until it gets to this threat assessment team testing. They are admitting that they do have a threat. It says treat, but it's supposed to be threat. A threat assessment team that identifies, assesses, and addresses threats to the WSU community and property, but they deny everything else in the statement. And the statement is that WSU failed to follow the process of the TAT testing, and that's why Kohberger was allowed to get as far as he did, according to their filing. Now, when it comes to number 26, how it says, as a result of WSU's actions and failures, 4 young college students were brutally murdered. Again, they're claiming the exact same thing. We're admitting that he did it, but we're not claiming anything else to anything else, meaning you're not going to blame this on us. This is crazy. Now, the next portion is about the parties and how each of the victims has one parent standing up for them in the case. Then it goes down to WSU is a subdivision of the state of Washington and operates a public university with campuses across the state of Washington. Now, they respond to this and say WSU admits it operates a public university in the state of Washington and has campuses in Pullman, Spokane, Richland, Vancouver, and Everett. The remainder of the allegations contained in paragraph 31 contain allegations or contentions of law which require no answer. To the extent an answer is required, WSU denies the same. And this should say to the extent an answer is required, not and answer is required. You'd think in big old 2026 they'd have better checking. Now, going down into jurisdiction and venue, they said they filed it in Skagit County because it was the one that made the most sense. And honestly, WSU didn't even argue that to begin with. It wasn't a big deal. Even when WSU filed for this to be moved to a federal court, they still admitted that the county it was filed in was correct, but they also gave all the reasonings for why it should be moved to a federal court. I gave my opinion on that whole thing. This is what the thumbnail for that looks like, and I'll have a link for it down in the description box. I don't like the fact that the federal system, the FBI, the Fed courts, the feds, the federal grand jury, all the things have been in such big control of this entire case. I mean, the feds being so heavily involved, I feel are a main reason why there's so much effery everywhere, especially since they just do whatever the hell they want to. They don't answer any questions. They don't provide any work. It's just a, yeah, trust me, bro type situation. And yeah, I'm sorry. You've not earned my trust. For years now, y'all have proven that you can't be trusted. Now, when it comes to the factual allegations common on all counts, and the stalking is a serious and prevalent risk to college students section. Again, WSU apparently had all these formal filings placed about him doing all these things, and all these people had all these issues with him. But we also have, again, the courts claiming that there was no stalking in this situation. Now, when it comes to this section, Factual allegations common to all counts. A, stalking is a serious and prevalent risk to college students. They're claiming the same thing all the way around. WSU is without knowledge or information sufficient to admit or deny. And it continues on and on and on and on and on until the very next section, which is section B. WSU has policies and procedures to control conduct and prohibit and prevent discrimination, harassment, and stalking. And they are claiming WSU admits Kohberger was admitted into the PhD program in WSU's criminal justice and criminology department. WSU also admits it offered Kohberger a salary for Kohberger's teaching assistant position. They deny anything else. This whole thing is that because Kohberger was a student and because Kohberger was technically an employee and because they paid him and because they housed him and all the things, that they were in control of him, that they were in control of his every move and they are wholly responsible for what happened. So they're going to continue to say, we deny each and every remaining allegation, and they're only going to admit the things that are factual, which is everything I just stated. That they employed him, that he was a student there, that he was a TA, that they paid him a salary, that they housed him in student housing. But when it comes to, again, everything else, especially the stalking stuff, just knowing that Idaho themselves said there was no stalking, that Kohberger did not stalk the victims. They've even slipped and said he didn't stalk the witnesses, which I guess would be technically Dylan and Bethany, that there's no connection between him or them and him in the house, that there's none of those things. I, again, just don't understand how so much of these incorrect things end up in a courtroom. And here it is repeated again. WSU was obligated to control Kohberger under the requirements of its employment agreement with him. But he wasn't technically doing anything wrong in order to get fired. There's a reason why Professor Snyder, the one that didn't even like him, the one that he argued with all the time, told ISP that he told the school that if they got rid of him, it would end up in some sort of civil lawsuit because they didn't have any standing. There was no reason for him to be let go. That's, again, coming from the professor that disliked him the most. Okay, let's just keep that in mind. So the next one, again, goes to WSU being obligated to control Kohberger because of the requirements to its graduate school policies and procedures. And they're basically just claiming, yes, there's a manual that we give to graduate students that receive teaching, research, or staff assistantships, and that they are expected to be at work each normal workday, including periods when the university classes are not in session, with the exception of the legal holidays designated by the Board of Regents. Everything else they're denying. And you know what we know? We know that even after he got to Pennsylvania, after him and his dad drove from Pullman back home, that he was grading papers prior to Christmas. We've seen the notations. They were out here all over the internet telling us that even though he was on his Christmas winter break, he was still working his TA position. The next one for 73 is just about how people are supposed to keep their standards really high when it comes to professional and ethical conduct. And they're saying, yep, that's what it says, but everything else you're trying to imply, like, we're just not going to even entertain it, basically. The next one says, WSU is obligated to control Kohberger under the requirements of its Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology Graduate Handbook. And again, it says here that they were required to control him under its standards of conduct for students. And let's see, what's this next one? WSU is obligated to control Kohberger under its executive policy number 15. So let's scroll down to where that one says it over here. And again, they're just claiming, yeah, we have a policy number 15. Next. Again, WSU is obligated to control Kohberger under its executive policy number 42. They're saying, again, the allegations contained in paragraph 102 contain allegations or contentions of law which require no answer. And what is that one? That WSU was also obligated to control him. And again, they're like, nah. The rest of this, when it comes to stuff at Virginia Tech, Columbine, all these different places that they're bringing up in here when it comes to behavioral threat assessments, their response is the same again over and over. WSU is without knowledge or information sufficient to admit or deny the allegations in paragraph 103. Now we go down to 106. And it says that there were disciplinary processes that WSU also have set forth in their executive policy number 42. WSU is not denying the fact that those things do exist. Now they're going in and claiming here that WSU was obligated to control Kohberger under the Waiver 21 Threat Assessment and Intervention Protocol. Now they're talking about Waiver 21, and they're talking about people needing him to be removed from programs and all the things that Waiver 21 would have showed. And WSU's response the entire time is the same. We are without knowledge or information about this. And again, it's just crazy to me that they're going to almost sit here and deny the fact that all these so-say formal complaints were filed. But we've also not seen them. We've only heard about them, and only from select people. Now, I do have some information in the Pullman FOIA documentation. We went through everything in Alive, but because they give you information about who actually filed FOIAs, and there were Gmail addresses showing, even if they were for streamers, even if they were for people in the media, it doesn't matter. YouTube took that entire live down, but we still have all of the files. And I do plan on going back through them in sections once everything else slows down, since it is older information. But we do have stuff in there about the car being seen and the love spreadsheet, and Ann Taylor wanting to talk to one of the officers. Actually, it wasn't even Ann Taylor. It was one of Ann Taylor's private investigators trying to set up a meeting with one of the Pullman Police Department officers. About what? I don't know. But I also have all of the information bundled together in summaries that was sent over from Pullman PD over to Brett Payne, and how he categorized them and filed them and everything. So I'm sure there are quite a few things in there that we need to go back over regardless, and maybe file some additional FOIAs for to get additional information. We're going to be doing that here pretty soon. So you guys just keep reminding me that we need to go back over those Pullman reports, because there is quite a bit of information in them. Okay, this next one says WSU was obligated to control Kohberger under the terms of WSU's Family and Graduate Apartment Agreement. And again, it's going to be the same thing. We're not going to play these games and try to say that we're responsible for anything. This also goes to WSU was further obligated to control Kohberger under the terms of WSU's Family and Graduate Apartment Agreement. They just repeated themselves again, and their response here is where it is a little bit different. See how sometimes they just say, hey, WSU is without knowledge or information sufficient to admit or deny, and then they'll say the allegations contained in X paragraph contains allegations or contentions of law which require no answer. So it really just depends on what they're actually claiming. Now again, we're going through the same repetition over and over. When Kohberger arrived at WSU in the fall of 2022, the WSU Police Department was consumed by a university investigation into its own long and sordid history of tolerating and, in fact, fostering serious misconduct in its own ranks. And again, I don't see how they would be having someone with this sort of behavior, the things that we are being told, shall I say, in the middle of this, and not take it more seriously, not give it more attention, maybe even not overreact a little, in my opinion. But again, that's just my opinion. But to all of this, what does WSU say? Same thing as always: without knowledge or information sufficient to admit or deny. And that keeps going for the entirety. So we're just going to scroll until we get to the next section right here. Let's go ahead and get these. And over here, if you guys did not make it to the video where we looked over all of this stuff, I will also have a link for it down in the description box. And it does have stuff about the cases that were going on at the time too. Okay. D says WSU brings Kohberger to the Pullman Moscow community and quickly learns of his threatening, stalking, and predatory behavior. That's not true, though. That's not true. Or they would have gotten rid of him ahead of time. And I'm just going to stick with that. I really am just going to stick with that. So then it goes into Kohberger's, birth and high school and autism spectrum disorder and weight loss and all these other things that were actually in his history. And they're just like, yeah, we don't know this guy like that. We're denying pretty much any and everything in here. So then it says on 215, after obtaining his master's degree from DeSales, Kohberger applied to the PhD program at WSU. And yeah, there's no reason for them to say that that's not true. So of course, because it's a factual situation, they're going to be like, yep, that's true, but we're going to deny every remaining allegation in that statement. Same thing when it comes for him being selected for the criminal justice program by a WSU panel. And this just continues to go through more of his history, even to the pool party that he was invited to. It talks about Brett Payne's history, how the University of Idaho and WSU have worked together for like a super long time. And through all of this, WSU is claiming the exact same statement. We are without knowledge or information sufficient to admit or deny. It goes more into a female at the pool party saying that Kohberger gave off a weird vibe. It talks about some sort of meet and greet in August of 2022 and different allegations that came out of that. WSU is keeping to theme the entire way through. And again, I know I've repeated this several times now. Keep in mind, these are all the allegations that are apparently in the formal complaints against Kohberger at WSU. All of them. And WSU is replying the exact same way for everything. Now, this is where we start getting into the false information. And I mean by them claiming that there was prints outside of the back window at the kitchen next to the slider, that they're claiming it was Kohberger looking in the window. The police officer at the time that 911 is called and the first responders are all getting there, I can't remember which officer it is, but we've gone through extensive amounts of body cam from the first responders and the rest of Moscow PD that showed up there. And they even said how small the prints were. These are really tiny prints. Majority of people believe it was just one of probably the college girls, be it one of the ones inside the house or someone in the neighborhood that's a friend of theirs. They had parties and get-togethers and things there all the time. That could have happened earlier on in the day. That could have happened at the get-together after the formal on Friday night, the night before. We don't know, but it's definitely too freaking tiny to be Kohberger's hands. But they go on to basically just say, yeah, we admit that he's the one who did it. And again, they're spelling his name Brian, but that for each and everything else, they're going to continue denying the allegations. And this is also where they mentioned Kohberger was stalking the victims. And I just really wish they would have given actual statements from the prosecution when it comes to all of these things that they have in here that are incorrect, instead of just claiming that they're without the knowledge or information sufficient, because there are things out there that they could have actually used for these arguments in way of proving that this lawsuit does have a lot of incorrect and false information in it. And why they chose to stay repetitive, I don't know. I guess it's just the way that they're supposed to do things. I don't know. I would have liked a more specific argument. Now, they're keeping to theme again when it comes to the violations of Title IX that the plaintiff's filing is alleging that they violated under legal counts. They just repeat the same thing. The allegations contained in paragraph, insert random number here, contain allegations or contentions of law which require no answer. If there is an answer required, they're just going to deny it. And they do that for the entire thing. It's just, yeah, the entire thing. The exact same thing when it comes to negligence. And the entire negligence argument is because they're claiming that as an employee and as a student, WSU should have been in control and been responsible for every little move that Kohberger ever made. And they are going to deny it all the way down into the very next section. They're giving the exact same response when it comes to gross negligence and when it comes to outrage. Now, when it comes to the survival claims, they're basically saying the exact same thing. The allegations contained in paragraph, enter number here, contain allegations or contentions of law which require no answer. To the extent an answer is required, WSU denies the same. Now, again, it's funny to me that to the extent and answer is required, this exact typo is pasted into this thing thousands upon thousands upon thousands of times. Insane. And they're going to do that for all of the victims and for both the wrongful death claim and the survival claim. Nothing changes. They continue to have the exact same verbiage for every single one of the victims. Nothing is different. It all matches the exact same format. For reservation of rights, it just says that paragraph 518 contains a reservation of rights not requiring a response. When it comes to the plaintiff's prayer for relief, it says defendant WSU denies plaintiffs are entitled to any relief request, including everything in these subparagraphs, which is A through H right here. And when it comes to a demand for jury trial, it says here that jury demand contains allegations or contentions of law to which no answer is required. Now it ends with this. Allegations not expressly admitted are denied. Multiple allegations were embedded in most of the paragraphs in plaintiff's complaint for damages and indeed in many of the individual sentences in the paragraphs. While WSU made every effort to address each allegation, WSU is aware it may be possible to interpret that a particular allegation was neither admitted or denied in this answer. Accordingly, in addition to the admissions and denials stated herein, WSU denies any allegations in plaintiff's complaint for damages that has not been expressly admitted or denied. Affirmative defenses. By way of further answer and first affirmative defense, defendant alleges that plaintiff's damages and or injuries, if any, were caused by the fault of a non-party for purposes of WCR 4220701, including but not limited to Bryan Kohberger, again spelled incorrectly, and or other individuals/entities that may become apparent through ongoing investigation and discovery. That's actually pretty interesting, the way that that's put there. Defendant reserves the right to identify additional individuals/entities in this matter, meaning WSU has every right to bring whatever discovery they deem necessary. By way of further answer and second affirmative defense, defendant challenges that plaintiff's injury/damages, if any, were caused by intentional conduct of Bryan Kohberger, again spelled incorrectly. So many typos, and they want to move this to Fed court. Honestly, why am I not shocked? And any other individuals plaintiffs harm them. What? That freaking statement makes no sense. Defendant reserves the right to identify additional individuals, entities in this matter. The damages caused by the intentional conduct must be segregated from injuries/damages allegedly caused by fault consistent with Tegman versus Accident and Medical Investigations from 2003. Did they have this messed up here too? No. This statement right here just doesn't make any sense, but okay. By way of further answer and third affirmative defense, defendant alleges that all actions of the defendant WSU, herein alleged as negligence, manifest a reasonable exercise of judgment and discretion by authorized public officials made in the exercise of governmental authority entrusted to them by law and are neither tortious nor actionable. By way of further answer and fourth affirmative defense, defendant alleges that the plaintiffs have failed to state a claim upon which relief may be granted. By way of further answer and fifth affirmative defense, the defendant alleges that the injuries and or damages being claimed were proximately caused by the fault of a party or former party to this case for whom the defendant is not responsible. By way of further answer and sixth affirmative defense, defendant alleges that the defendant at all times acted in good faith in the performance of its duties and is therefore immune from suit for the matters charged in plaintiff's complaint. So even though they're neither admitting or denying anything that should have been, according to the reports, formally filed within their own walls, they're still saying, if something did happen, we did our job and we're immune from any sort of backlash because we followed protocol. It'll be really interesting to see if discovery and depositions end up happening here. By way of further answer and seventh affirmative defense, defendant alleges that the plaintiff has failed to adequately mitigate damages, if any. By way of further answer and eighth affirmative defense, the defendant alleges that the plaintiffs have failed to file a claim against the state of Washington as required by RCW 4.921.00 and .110. By way of further answer and ninth affirmative defense, defendant alleges that plaintiff's claims are barred by the statute of limitations. Yeah, there was a statute of limitations problem, I believe, in Idaho as well. I'm going to have to gather some information on that. I'd really like to know the specifics because every district, every state, it's all so different, which is so dumb, but okay. Reservation of rights. Defendant WSU reserves the right to amend its answer to plaintiff's complaint for damages by way of adding additional affirmative defenses and counterclaims as may be warranted by discovery. Prayer for relief. Wherefore, having fully answered plaintiff's complaint for damages, defendant WSU prays for judgment as follows. For judgment against plaintiffs, dismissing plaintiff's claim with prejudice. That the court award defendant WSU all costs and reasonable attorney's fees to the extent allowed by law, and for such order and further relief in favor of defendant WSU and against plaintiffs as this court deems just and equitable. Now, again, we already do have a response that was posted over on Twitter by Sarah D. Irish in way of their response for the motion to transfer this to a federal court. And I will repeat what I said at the beginning of this video as I'm scrolling through this. It just seems like having this put in a federal court would mean that everything that the plaintiffs are claiming they're entitled to technically sort of goes away. Something about some sort of immunity is what I'm understanding. Don't quote me on that because I haven't read all of the exact verbiage just yet. And I do like to get other people's legal professional opinions on these kinds of things too, because I do not claim to know everything. I do not have a law degree. I have a criminal investigative forensic science degree that I only got step 1 done in and only halfway through step 2. So I don't claim to know everything, but I do damn well claim to want to try to understand and learn everything, which is why we're going through all of this, even though it's some sort of civil suit, because I'm hoping for, again, discovery, depositions, information, something that can maybe make puzzle pieces fit together. But that's really it for now. We'll go over these actual responses when it comes to what they have now filed to argue this being moved to federal court and what their declaration from Thomas Vertetis has to say. But for now, if you like the way that I present this information and give my opinion, please don't forget to leave a like on the way out, subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed already, and please don't forget to make sure that the notification bell is set to all so you don't miss any of my rants, reviews, reactions, updates, or deep dives. See y'all.